All right.
Start it? Okay. When I say 6 million, what do you think of? Anything? Okay.
A lot.
A bunch.
Okay, well, how many of you have ever heard of the Sachsenhausen concentration camp? I had the privilege last December of visiting the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. It's about 35 kilometers out of Berlin, Germany. When I say 6 million, obviously I'm talking about the Jews that were exterminated during the Holocaust. When I visited this camp, nothing prepared me for the emotions that I experienced while I was there. Now, obviously, we all know a lot about the Holocaust, but I'm going to zone in a little bit on this specific camp in Germany. This camp operated for 7 years, and during those 7 years, approximately 35,000 died. In 1936, this camp was established, and 2 different organizations with online websites, JewishGeneration.org, quotes that the camp started in 1938, and then the Jewish Virtual Library says the camp was established in 1936. The reason that there's speculation about those 2 years is because the first prisoners were sent to this camp in 1936 to begin construction on building the camp. But it wasn't actually until 2 years later in 1938 that the first prisoners were sent to the camp for housing and to begin their work there. This camp was made specifically to be a training facility for SS guards in the beginning. Now, the SS stands for Schutzstaffel, which means protective squad, and we've all heard of the SS guards during the Holocaust time. The camp was also built to set an example for other concentration camps. It's shaped in the form of a triangle, and at one point is the main grand entrance. And at that grand entrance, written across the front, it says, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. Now, because this camp was built to set an example, its layout was also copied at many other concentration camps. It was shaped like a triangle, and walking in the front entrance gate, you can see all around you, all of the barracks were built just like this. And so at any given time, the guardsmen and the watchtower, the main watchtower at the very front, can look out and see in between every single one of the barracks and all of the walking lands. The gun post, the labor factories were all built in parallel lines in the triangle following so that the guardsmen could see. The barracks were long triangles, and I just kind of want you to imagine a long rectangular building, much like a cabin at a camp or something, and on each end are the sleeping quarters. And in the sleeping quarters were bunks stacked 3 high, and there were also entrances into each end of the sleeping quarters. And also in the barracks, in the middle of all of the barracks were the washrooms and the storage and the laundry facilities. And so one washroom was approximately pretty much about the size of this patio right here. And so I want you to imagine 2 wash basins in the middle with about 50 or 60 people washing at one time. And I cannot imagine that. We visited in December, and it was freezing cold, and it wasn't really even the dead of winter yet either. Because this concentration camp was made to set an example for others, the security was also taken into consideration for other camps to also do the same display. There was a 3-meter wall across the whole outside perimeter of the camp. After the wall was lethal electric fences. There, of course, were guard dogs, and there was what was called the death strip. And for example, a death strip would be an area of land if a prisoner was ever seen or wandered into that area, a guard did not have to give any warning whatsoever, and they could just shoot to kill. Before World War II, the majority of the prisoners at this camp were communist homosexuals, yes, war criminals, any teens that had been arrested for thief. And after the event in November of 1939, the Crystal Night, this is the event when over 7,500 Jewish shops and synagogues were destroyed and burnt. And this is kind of the turning point for the Jewish population when many began to flee and evacuate. Over 1,800 Jews were sent to this specific camp, and in the following weeks, 500 of those Jews were killed. At this time, there was about 11,000 prisoners in the camp, and there was no crematorium here in this specific camp at this time. It was in Berlin, so dead bodies were shipped to Berlin to be cremated. And in 1939, just to give you guys an idea of the increased rate of deaths, in 39 there were around 800 deaths at this specific camp, and in 1940 there were over 4,000 at this specific camp. Some examples of brutality were a place built that the prisoners were forced to build called Station Z. And this we got to visit and walk down, and it's kind of just a steep ramp, and down this steep ramp there's these big huge doors, almost like farm doors. And when we asked what's behind these doors, they said, oh, there's nothing behind the doors. At the time there was not anything behind the doors, and later they built a crematorium there. But what they did was they invited a lot of Nazi officers, because this Station Z was built solely for the purpose of mass extermination. And the prisoners were told to run down, and at the inaugural, ceremony as a representation for the Nazi officers to illustrate, they sent prisoners down, and 96 people were killed, because it was easy for the guards to just stand on the ledge and just shoot down below. And an excerpt taken from a trial of a commander named Anton Kindle, he said that many commanders were trained here to go on and command other concentration camps, and also the commander of Auschwitz was also trained at this specific concentration camp. And under his reign, 42,000 were killed under his command, and at Sachsenhausen, 18,000 were killed. Overall, 33,000 were taken away during the liberation time in 1945, and the order was to be taken to put on a ship, and the ships were to be sunk. 2 days after this order, the camp was liberated by the Red Army. 200,000 over the 7 years had passed through this camp, and over 100,000 were killed. What a lot of people don't realize also about this camp is that it was the largest counterfeit operation ever in Europe. They had a counterfeit operation making counterfeit American dollars and English and British pounds. And millions of British pounds were never found by the Bank of England either. So, in 1956, this camp was made a memorial site and is now open to the public. Charles Lane wrote a book called Hallowed Ground, and in this book he talks about the obligation that survivors have to tell their story and share their experiences. And we're in a generation right now where people are about to start forgetting and not being made aware of the Holocaust. And so we hear it all the time, and it's a very famous slogan, but we need to know our history so that it's not repeated.